Hi, everybody, and welcome to Quill and Curtain, the podcast, a podcast for playwrights, by playwrights. This is Darren Friedman, and welcome to Season 2. We've made it. I'm so excited to share this new season with you. We have amazing guests, and it's going to be so awesome. Today, I cannot wait to introduce you to our guest. Their name is Gina, Femia. They are an award-winning playwright and performer whose work has been showcased and developed at prestigious venues across the country. They've had work at the Goodman Theater, MCC Theater, Playwrights Horizons, and so much more. With a repertoire of, you're not going to believe this, 37 full-length plays. Gina's notable works have been seen everywhere. Their accolades include the Leah Ryan Prize, the Doric Wilson Award, and nominations for the Drama League and NYIT. Gina is a former core writer with the Playwright Center and an alum of several esteemed programs like EST Youngblood and Page 73's Interstate 73. They have also received residencies with Page 73, Powerhouse, and Space on Ryder Farm. Beyond their playwriting, Gina is an educator, teaching at institutions like the Playwright Center and Primary Stages ESPA. They also write novels. Their debut young adult novel, Alondra, was named a Best Book for Teens in 2023 and is a finalist for the Golden Knight Award. Gina's work overall is categorized by its emotional depth, vibrant characters, and a commitment to exploring diverse narratives, including themes surrounding queer and LGBTQ plus characters. That was a hell of a bio, Gina. How are you?
I'm good, Darren. That was lovely. Just to hear all of those things listed out and in your enthusiastic way. That was very much a treat for me to listen to.
Oh my God. Well, it's amazing because I have all different kinds of playwrights and writers on this podcast at all different kind of levels. And it's exciting to me when I have somebody on that can really speak to not only their experience as a writer, but their successes. And I know somebody like you have had a lot of successes. So it's amazing. So it's something that we could all aspire to be. And it's just so impressive. Absolutely. So, okay, I have a question that kind of leads in every podcast I have. And I think it's a really good conversation starter. And I want you to take it as openly as you can. What drew you to playwriting or your writing in general? And when did you know it was your path?
Yeah, I love that. I think it is a great conversation starter. And I love to talk about this, because I've thought about it a lot because, sometimes I'll be sitting in bed at night, like, how did I get here? How did I, why is this happening? In a good way. But, so I wrote, since I could, actually from before I could write, I would write. So, and what I mean by that is that in kindergarten, during free time, the teacher would assign us where we could play. And I have vivid memories of this. She would always assign who she thought were boys to play with the Legos and girls to play with the baby dolls. And I always wanted to play with the Legos, but she always forced me to play with the baby dolls. And so instead of doing that, my kindergarten rebellion was to go to the table that had a bunch of paper stapled together and pens, and I would write books. And I didn't know how to write words yet, but I would draw pictures, and then I'd go home and I would narrate the story to my parents. And so there was always this thing inside me that wanted to tell stories and valued storytelling. And like I said before, I knew how to really construct words on pages. And but so I would do that. It did grow into like writing short stories. I actually not elementary school, but middle school, a teacher one day like called up my parents, and she said, we have a problem because Gina plagiarized for homework, and she didn't believe that like the story I wrote could have come from me. And so my parents had to like really explain like, no, that's just Gina likes to write stories, and so does it very often. Has a 50 in math, but is really good at telling these stories. And so there was like this idea in my family that I would always become a writer, which is really helpful to be an aspiring writer with a dream, to have your parents kind of understand that about you. And so when I was 16, my dad signed me up for this program. And so I grew up in Brooklyn, in Bay Ridge, South Brooklyn. And South Brooklyn is an interesting place because we're in the vicinity of the city, but we're about an hour out by subway to the city. So it's not like super accessible. But there were still like different things that obviously I had access to. And my dad saw this program called Young Playwrights, Inc., which is now sadly defunct, but back then was around and kicking. And he encouraged me to take part in this program. And I at first didn't want to, because I was like, well, I don't know how to write music, and all plays are musicals. So how could I possibly write a play? Because my base understanding of theater at that point was Broadway musicals. Whenever we would see a play or go to the theater, that's what I would see. And so, he was like, I think that there are plays without music. And I was like, wow, sounds fake, but okay, I'll try it. And I was part of this program at 16 that really defined the rest of my life for me in terms of writing and becoming a playwright, because I learned that plays don't all have music, and those are the plays that I actually think are like even that speak to me even more. And so I remember seeing my first real straight play, which was called Vincent and Brixton by Nicholas Wright, and just realizing like there's this monologue about the stars and darkness. And I remember again vividly, even now as a 37-year-old person, and I remember being like, that's music, actually, like the way that the words are being spoken in such a beautiful way is music. And so I was like, okay, I think I can write plays. And so and seeing more and more straight plays just really opened up a whole world, theatrical world for me, and an understanding of new ways to tell stories. And I think I really loved the way that a story for theater is composed mainly of speaking, and how flawed an art form it is, because just conversations in general with other people is like a hard thing in a good way. And so to create an entire story just based on what other people say or don't say, even as they speak, was just the way that my heart said, yeah, okay, this is how I want to tell stories, actually. And this is the best way for me to like explore the truths that I'm curious about, or the questions that resonate deep inside me, and all of that stuff. So that, I think, is a bit of an answer.
No, that's amazing. No, that's an amazing answer. It always fascinates me because I came to writing later in life. So whenever I find someone like you who from the very earliest stages find a voice, I think that's amazing. And it doesn't happen for everybody like that. So I think I'm so impressed by that answer. So let me ask you this, because I do want to talk about your themes, because I think they're really important. And after reading some of your work, I'll get into that later. But I really want to know what inspires your work.
Insane. Yeah, the biggest pieces of inspiration for me come from what I'm curious about at any given time and what I'm angry or annoyed about. And so what I mean about that is like, if there is, I mean, writing plays just has really become the place that I go to try to figure myself out and figure the world out. So I know a lot of people write plays in an attempt to change the world or to, um, do something larger than themselves with the world. But for me, it always starts with myself. And it starts from a place of just, well, Gina, are you curious about? Or what, Gina, are you mad about? And I mean, it all goes hand in hand at the end of the day because I am part of the world. And the stories that I'm telling are definitely stories that other people will resonate with that are also like experiencing similar things, or just people that are going to want to counteract those things, but I really start from a place of self. And it's funny because I think that could be looked at as being selfish, but I really don't think in art one can be selfish. I think that we actually do have to center ourselves when we're writing, first and foremost, and of course be aware that we live in the society and be aware of societal conversations and norms and thoughts and all that. But I think that if you start with yourself, then that's for me, like being an artist is starting with the self. So that's why I always have like an internal conversation and see how to make that external into a story that I want to tell. I also have a lot of thoughts about like things that are how art sometimes befalls these concepts or rules that are all man-made, but then they become a rule, and it becomes an unshakable rule in the eyes of a lot of people. So I like to push back against that and things that I want to tell or write, particularly when it comes to the idea of an adaptation, because I really feel strongly for myself that adaptations can't be defined because they are man-made and they're reliant on art that has come before that didn't necessarily have rules. And so how can we apply set rules to the idea of adaptation? Why can't the artist create their own set of rules when it comes to adaptation? And so I am a little bit obsessed with writing my versions of adaptations that will either energize people or give them the impulse to tell me why it's not an adaptation. Which I'm happy to have those conversations because, like I just said, I think that it's a bit, I don't know, silly or weird to just have rules when it comes to art, like set rules. That's where I get my inspiration from.
You're leading me into a question that I really am fascinated about, considering the work that you're doing. And this was going to be a question for later, but I think it really goes in with what you were just talking about. What role do you think playwrights have in shaping society and sparking important conversations when it comes to the world around us?
I think that our role is, as any artist's role, it's to look at society and look at ourselves in it and to tell a story that explores that. I don't think that our role is to answer questions, because it's any story we tell, no matter what, will be filtered through our personal point of view. And our answer can't be the answer for everybody. I really fully believe that. And so I think that, like with any art, it's about telling a story to the best of your ability that explores something, but not to feel the pressure of being the only voice in telling it or to provide answers to questions. I actually really respect art that goes out of its way not to provide answers, but to portray a situation that is happening. And I know that art sometimes gets looked down on if it doesn't provide an answer. But I don't think that, first of all, I don't want to get my answers in art, very much so. I want to get emotional resonance in art, not necessarily societal answers or societal anything really. So yeah, I think that the role of the playwright and the role of the artist is to tell the stories that deeply resonate within themselves, and and putting it out into the world so that we can have a very human experience together. And I think in theater, especially, because it is one of the only communal arts there is, that's an art that relies on community to create it, and it relies on community to view it. I think that the more human the story, the greater the impact that an individual audience will feel and the collective audience will feel.
You just segued so naturally into what I wanted to ask you next. Because I think I just read one of your works, and it was really powerful for me. And just to let everybody know the title so you can get it. The title of the piece is "This Happened Once at the Romance Depot off the I-87 in Westchester." Other than being a brilliant title, I think that the human element of your storytelling is really compelling. And I want to talk to you about your themes, because I want to know what you believe your theme and what the themes of your work, how does it resonate with the people you're hoping it to reach? And what do you view it as an overall aspect of your work?
Yeah, I think that, so the themes that I come to naturally versus looking at it from the outside. I'm inside it, right? So I like to often say that queerness is my norm, for example. So I am a queer person walking through the world. And so when I look at things, they're not, while I understand that because of the society we live in, they're coded as heteronormative. I don't I don't reach for heteronormativity when I look at anything in the world. I see it through a lens of queerness. And I don't think that that's true for everybody who is queer. But I kind of cultivated my mind so that now I really do see, like, queerness is my norm, to the point where if I step outside of my safety bubble and I go to a place where queerness is very much not the norm, I have to be reminded of that. And then I feel bad for everybody involved, because I think that queerness is great. But so that's why a lot of my work just naturally bends towards this idea of queerness. And for me, queerness is an infinite thing. So there's an infinite amount of stories to tell revolving around that. So even if it's a story that doesn't necessarily embrace queerness, I find myself still, like, it still weaves itself in some way, right? But I just write what's emotionally true for me at any given moment, and what I want to explore, and what I need to tell. I'm also, in addition to queerness, I know Romance Depot is a play with the heteronormative couple at its core, but there is still queerness throughout it. And I would argue that their relationship in it is actually, while heteronormative, also does tackle this idea of queerness, because the play is asking viewers to look at their relationship in a way that isn't what might be looked at as traditional, a traditional romantic relationship, which for me incorporates queerness. But I just write, a lot of my community, a lot of the people that I consider my found family and friends, we all share that same identity, that same background. And so after I write for myself, I'm also writing for the people in my closest vicinity. And then I hope that it can just open up into the world and hopefully people will resonate with my plays, whether or not they are part of the community, because I'm trying to write about the muddiness and murkiness of humanity, which, while we don't have a one shared humane existence, there's no way to do that with humanity. I think that I hope that there are parts that like we can all recognize in the humanness of characters, whether it's the awkwardness or the longing, the dreams. I know that sometimes my work is discounted by decision makers or gatekeepers because the plays they hyper focus on these seemingly banal moments in a person's life. That's how they're looked at from the outside of the play. It's like, well, this isn't about an election. This isn't about a socio like a political movement or thing. This is just about two people falling in love in a sex shop, and what's the point of that? And I like to remember, though, that like the seemingly banal points of all of our lives are actually usually the highest stake moments of our lives. And so I think that, I don't need to write stories about kings and queens. I can write stories about us, and we're going to get that. Like, the stakes are going to be high for the characters, but they're stakes that resonate with us because they're the stakes of our lives so often. And so to say like they're not high stakes is to say that our lives don't contain those high stakes. And that's something that I disagree with as well. So I think that answers your question. I don't know where I went.
No, it totally does. No, it does. And I think that if anybody reads that play in particular, I think any of your other work, I think that, my wife said, "How was the piece?" And I was like, I couldn't formulate why I liked it. Like like she said, "Well, what was it about?" And I was like, well, it was in a sex shop, and and what I loved, and I have a hard time with this in early drafts whenever I write and I try to get it out, but the subtlety of your writing, I think, is something that people, when they read your work, should explore, because you never come right out and say anything, which I think is so impressive, because I always have this really hard, I don't think there's any term I hate more than on the nose. Like it's the most, other than emerging playwright, I don't think there's anything more than you can say that's more insulting to somebody who writes for a living. But, I think there's this just wonderful subtleness to what your characters go through. So anyone who's going to read that play or read your other work, I think keep that in mind, because it's something that you can read. I think every time you read something, you can learn from that person. And I learned a lot from you. But I wanted to ask you, what do you think your primary challenges are right now when you send your work out there?
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying all of that. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you picking up on that subtlety, because I segues into my answer, which is, I think one of the biggest challenges is how subtle my work is on the page. And I think that it makes it, I think that reading plays in general is a very challenging thing to do, regardless of the play. I think that this is an art form that is meant to be explored verbally. So I find for myself that I struggle with reading plays, but going to see a reading of a play really is a useful thing for me. But I think that with my plays, because I do rely on subtlety and murkiness and muddiness, it's very challenging to read on the page and kind of see what the play is or what the play can be. So I think that is one of my major challenges in sending work out. And I also, like I mentioned, I think that there's a real thirst from producing theaters to produce plays that are more political on their surface, which I think is great and I think is worthwhile. But I don't write those types of plays, so I would identify that as a challenge for myself too, as somebody who loves to write about the human condition. And I saw this phrase at a Vivian Maier exhibit. Vivian Maier was a photographer who never developed any of her work, and when she passed and they developed her work, she turned out to be one of the best photographers of this century, or the last century rather. But in the exhibit, they had the phrase that she took pictures of, like, she was focused on theater of the ordinary. And I was like, oh, that phrase resonates so deeply with me and the work that I write. It's theater of the ordinary. It's theater of the everyday stakes. It's theater of the we're just trying to get by. And so I think that it's just hard to find places that connect with those themes for the work. And then I think too, like, when I write about queerness, I don't write about it in the narrative form that we often see it, right? So like I said, like, for me, Romance Depot is a very queer play. I think it's also a very trans play because it's playing with the idea of gender roles and questioning gender roles, even though the characters are cis. And it just doesn't fit into these neat boxes that I think that producing organizations that are often not, that are often cis and not queer don't really understand. Or even if they are queer, there's like, I see in a lot of queer folks even that there's a very like black and white view of what that means and what that looks like. And my plays kind of say, I don't think that that's completely true. And so I think that there's a challenge because I write against what is usually looked at as like, this is the way you should tell the story. And I simply refuse to do it. And sometimes I'll think too, I'll be like, well, maybe I should try to tell it in that kind of way. And it always goes off the rails. So I don't know.
But I'm so excited by it because here's the thing, as the father of a trans child, my child was 21, just entered senior year of college. And actually, I found out yesterday, we're very excited. They're an English major, but they just got a concentration in gender studies, which is it's really hard to get into that at their school. So they got in and they're like off the charts excited. But finding work that speaks to my child is really hard to find. And it's like, how many times, not that there's anything wrong with rumors, but it's like, how many times can you see it? And it's like, let's like get out there and stretch our brains a little bit and look at pieces that actually don't talk about what we're used to. And I'm not saying make everybody uncomfortable. I'm just saying, here's a viewpoint that, like I was just having an image of my head of your scene directions with like penises of all different colors and sizes are all over the set. And I was like, that is the most brilliant, wonderful imagery. I love it. I love it. And I'm also thinking of my artistic director friend who runs a community theater going, I could never do it. And what a shame that we don't take the opportunity to show somebody that, you know what, there are other points of view. And also we're all adults. And I think we can get over the fact that there's a dildo on stage. It's just one of those things that I really think this is exciting. When I read your work, I'm like, this is exciting work and it deserves to be seen.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And that is a very real thing too regarding Romance Depot. So it received a workshop at the Goodman, which was fantastic. And I really thought that the workshop was going to help propel the play into production. It still hasn't received a production. And in part, the feedback that I was receiving was that artistic directors loved the play, respected the play, but there was no way they could program it because it takes place in a sex shop. So that's a very real thing too. And exactly, like writing against what societally has been deemed appropriate, even though it's closer, I would argue, closer to the truth of humanity, it just doesn't fit neatly into seasons. And part of that is because theater is really fraught right now. It's always hard to produce theater and to sustain theater. And I know that it's coming from fear that it would upset set subscribers to see a sex shop portrayed on stage. But I also know that, when it was done at the Goodman, it got a lot of younger audiences from in their early 20s, students from colleges, local colleges. And I'm just, they loved it.
Yeah. No,
I think,
my child would love this play. My child would love this play. And that's what I was just, it really got me excited. I'm gonna send it to them. And I just know they'll love it. Okay, so I have a practical question for you. Walk me through your typical writing process. I mean, how do you develop the play through concept to getting to the finished script? What is your A to Z?
Yeah, I love that question. So I really, for plays, I cannot do an outline. I need it to come out organically. And so I start by listening for dialogue, and I listen for the voices, and I just capture it. So I'll write it down either by hand, or if I'm at my computer, I'll write it down, type it up, or I'll use my drafts on email on my phone to like write it down like that. But there always comes a point where I'm like, I'm just going to let this pull me. I'll see like, oh, certain themes are coming out. That's cool. Oh, that ignites. Oh, maybe there should be another character. Oh, maybe that character should do this. Okay. But to get to the end of a first draft, I just let it come out of me as quickly as possible. So I usually try to write a complete first draft. And like, once I have all that information, and also daydreaming about it, thinking about it, wondering about it, once I have all that, then the first draft comes out really quickly. And like, I can do a first draft in a week, which sounds impressive, but to me, it's not impressive. It's just the way I write a play. I don't think that, because, when I say that, because when I say that, the reaction is sometimes like, wow, I could never do that. And I'm like, you don't have to do that. It's just the way I write a play. And the way that you write a play is as valid as the way I write a play. It's all valid. It doesn't matter how it comes out, if it comes out slowly, if it comes out quickly, because then my process, actually, the after process of getting to that first draft is long, because then I have to look at it and say, what is this actually? Like, then I have to apply structure to it after. Then I have to look at it and say, what story am I trying to tell? The first draft is always helpful because all the instincts are there, but then it's about molding instincts and understanding like why behind it, or does another character have to go in here? And when I don't, and I actually struggle a lot with the rewriting process when I don't have a workshop process. So I struggle to rewrite simply on my own. So while, again, it's impressive to some that I could write a first draft by myself, I really can't do the real work of the play, the journey of the play with the rewriting if I don't have developmental support of some kind. So sometimes I'll work with a dramaturg if I feel like the play isn't ready to show other people. Like I can work with the dramaturg, or I'll do like an informal reading with friends. It's just something to like help me kickstart into the rewriting process. But I do have a lot of plays, of those 37 plays, that I feel like still could use a lot of development work. But yeah, that's generally the way that I construct and go about writing a play.
What do you do when you feel blocked?
Yeah, I love talking about feeling blocked and exploring what that actually means. So I will I mean there's been a period of time this year has been a very challenging year. It felt like there wasn't a lot of movement in the way that I wanted it to be moving in terms of my career. And I kind of hit a wall being like, what's the point of writing another play if like plays like Romance Depot? And I have this other play called The Violet Sisters that's been around for 10 years that also hasn't received a production. That I'm just like, well, what's the point of adding more to the pile if these plays aren't getting produced? And so I kind of hit a real big block the beginning of this year with that mindset. I didn't realize that I was thinking that consciously. That was a subconscious thought running through me. But what I did know was that I had started a couple of plays and was refusing to work on them. And so I really did a lot of work because I was like, it's fine to ignore the thing. I don't need to like be focusing on it. But like I said, um, it's like writing plays is a natural thing for me at this point. It's part of breathing. And so when I'm not working on it, it feels like I'm not breathing. And so I did a lot of work to discover that that was the subconscious thing keeping me blocked. I did free writing, just, you know, trying to find the energy to unblock the block. And I talk about finding the energy a lot in my teaching, because it's proven true to me to be true to me as an artist, that if there's a block, it's usually because the energy is somewhere else. And if you're just facing the block and you're facing the wall and you're just saying like break, 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 um, you're not actually finding the energy that is flowing towards the thing that is most exciting. And so this was like the larger career block. But in terms of a creative block, I'm usually like, well, I should write this scene. I should write this scene right now. I should write this scene right now. And if that's not happening, it's because I want to write a different scene or I want to work on something else. And so I just have to find the energy and follow it to go somewhere else.
You do a few different things.
Mm-hmm.
You've written a book.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find it necessary to define yourself as a certain kind of writer?
No, I really love to embrace the term writer. And I didn't do that. I also write for film and things like that. Nothing that's like been super exciting or impressive, but I do write screenplays and things like that. But that I love being a playwright. And when I write plays, I'm a playwright. And I love writing novels. And when I write novels, I'm a writer. I really don't even say novelist or author. I'm just a writer. And when I write screenplays, I'm a screenwriter. But altogether, I'm a writer and I'm also an artist because I also do perform my work. Some work, I write solo work that I also perform. And so I like the term artist best of all for myself.
It's so interesting. I had Crystal Skillman on
Mm-hmm.
last season, and she had just decided and announced, ironically enough, very specifically, that she wanted to be called a writer and
Mm-hmm.
not a playwright.
Mm-hmm.
She does comic books and she does other
Yeah.
things. And what was fascinating to me was I also had another um, guest on last season, and they were a marketing person.
Hmm.
And they said I had to define myself. Are
Yeah.
you a playwright? Then be a playwright, and like announce to the world. Because I do screenplays as well. And I've written
Hmm.
novels as well. Nothing that's ever hit, but I've done it. And
Yes.
I think it's so fascinating that we're encouraged to, and I don't know who's encouraging us, but I feel the pressure. And if I feel the pressure, you should definitely feel the pressure because you're out there much more than I, that we have to be a certain
Hmm.
thing.
Right.
And it drives me crazy. Like, what the
Yeah.
hell? It's
Yeah.
like I've never understood it. And
Hmm.
as we try different things, why can't we be different things? And I don't identify as being an actor anymore, and I did it for 30 years, but it's
Hmm.
just that's okay too.
Hmm.
I love that you say you want to be an artist because it's such a wonderful thing and refreshing thing to hear that you know how to say this is who I am.
Hmm. Yeah. It's been a lot of self introspection and a lot of rejection too to get to that point, because I really feel like I understand where the marketing person is coming from, because that is marketing. It's easier to market a person who has an easily packageable identity to put out into the world. I get that. Um, and I feel like none of my career has been straightforward, like so many of ours. And the one thing that I can control is how I view myself. And that's something that, as much as folks might try to take away from me, they can't if I don't let them. So I know that I'm an artist, and I know that people will have thoughts and opinions on that. And I also know that I don't care because what does that get me? Because even if I did say, you know what, I'm a playwright, that's what I put out into the world, somebody will look at my work and say, but what about how you write books? So how can you be a playwright? How can you just say you're a playwright? Or they'll say like, you shouldn't be performing because that makes it really hard for people to understand what you do. So even if I did cater to the thoughts and cater to the rhetoric, there's still going to be somebody out there that's not going to be happy about it. So I
Oh
may as
my
well be
God.
happy about it.
You know what, Gina? Fuck the haters. Okay. So I have a question that I ask everybody, and it's my favorite question. So the pressure is on, and I'm going to put you on the spot. What is your favorite rejection story?
I don't. So I want to tell this story, but I don't know.
Just take the names out. Just go for it.
No, yes, of course. All right. So I'm going to tell this story. It's an untraditional rejection story, I think. So had a meeting with a literary manager about my play Alondra. Um, and this is like back in like 2017, so it's years ago. And the I was talking a lot about how, she was like, "Oh yeah, the play is," she liked the play and she wanted to know more about me as an artist. And at the time, I identified as bisexual, though now I really identify as queer, is a better term for me. But I was talking about like the protagonist in Alondra is bisexual, and that's a really important part to the play for me because um I said I'm a bi person, and I was really talking about that a lot. And she stopped me and said, "You're bisexual?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "But I thought, aren't you married to a man?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Huh, I read about that in the Times." And that's when I knew that I was never going to get produced at that theater. So that's why I say it's a rejection story. And it is truly one of my favorites because I think I read about that in the Times is one of the funniest phrases that has ever been spoken to me in that context.
People are idiots. People are unbelievable idiots. I don't understand. I don't understand. And they think this person probably thinks they're the most enlightened person in the world because they read the Times every Sunday.
I know. I didn't read that article, so I'm
I don't
still
think you're missing much.
clearly I still don't know what it was.
All right, Gina, Femia, you are an amazing, amazing talent. And I am so honored that you came on today.
Oh my God, I'm so happy that you asked. This was so much fun.
Okay. So, as always, our podcast is brought to you by Point Park University's Master of Fine Arts and Writing for Screen and Stage. I went there. I got my MFA there. You should definitely check it out. And Gina, is there anything going on in the future that we should keep our eyes out?
Yes, actually. Very exciting. Boomerang Theater in New York City is producing my play, Mercutio Loves Romeo Loves Juliet Loves. Just in a couple of months from this podcast recording in November of 2024. We'll run for 3 weeks in New York City at the ART Uptown Spaces. And again, it's with Boomerang Theater Company. So if you are interested in attending a very queer three-hander kind of adaptation of Romeo and Juliet set in an all-girls Catholic school in 2005, then I encourage you to come out and see us. You can find more information on Boomerang's website. And I'm sure I'll be posting things as well. I'm mostly on Instagram these days, and my handle is at Harry the Houdini.
You're awesome. Okay, everybody, stay tuned for our next episode. We come out on a weekly basis, and I can't wait to see you guys on the next one. Thank you, Gina, for everything.
Thank you, Darren. This was great.